Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to another edition of the Filmmakers Forum. And let me especially welcome our guests, Biodun, Victor, and Emma. You're most welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, I think we can get going. I'm going to have to ask our guests to put on their videos as we go along. So welcome. The Filmmakers Forum is an event organized by the Nollywood Studies Center of the School of Media and Communication and is intended to facilitate interaction amongst filmmakers and between filmmakers and the audience. And as we go along, we'll take questions from the audience. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. I'll just take now the profiles of our guests to welcome them properly. We have for our discussion today, Biodun Stephen, Victor Sanchez Aghahowa, and Ema Edosio Deelen. Our topic today is on the craft of storytelling, which continues to be an ever-present issue in our industry, in Nollywood, and these days more and more attention is being drawn to the need to pay more attention to that aspect of our work here. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to ask our guests, please, to put on their videos so that our audience can see them. Let's get this show on the road. Like I said already, our discussion this morning is on the craft of storytelling. We have heard so much about need to grow in this. In recent times, people are complaining more and more that a lot more needs to be done in terms of growing this as a strength of the industry. We have, according to various voices, done quite well, technologically speaking, with our filmmaking, but this still remains a weak point. So let's start with you, Biodun. In your view, what makes a story compelling in the context of Nollywood? Because people have said that, yes, we tell good stories, however, there's still aspects that need to be improved upon. So what makes a story, what would you say makes a story compelling for us?
Thank you so much. I think that is, for me, it would be in the simplicity of it. And also in the relatability as well of it. I think that a story is compelling when it's pretty much you can see either yourself or somebody that you know in the story. And of course, the authenticity of it, which means that this experience that you're sharing via the story is authentic, so much so you can feel it, you can almost touch it, you know. And of course, it's one thing to have a story, but again, I think the performance, a really, really superlative performance, brings the story to life. So for me, it would be three things: authenticity, relatability, and the performance thereof.
Thank you. Actually, the one of relatability, I know that is one of the things that has helped you could say, grow our industry here, because the audience is one of the things they say. I remember interviewing somebody once for fieldwork, and the person said, well, the Hollywood films, I cannot relate. But with the Nollywood, I see myself. I see my family in these films and so on. So it makes a lot of sense. Let me turn to you, Emma, because I know that you have, in previous conversations we've had, Emma, you have spoken about this thing Biodun said about authenticity, that this is one of the things you try to drive with your films, to make them authentic, to show the gritty, in some cases, aspects of life here. So what for you will be compelling in terms of telling a story?
I think for me, filmmaking is therapy, right? And it's the way that I connect with the world around me. And one of the main goals when I make movies is that I want my audience to feel. And um, I would say that compelling means that I can easily share themes with people from around the world. I always use this example. I say that the theme of love is universal, but my experience of love from Lagos, Nigeria, or growing up in Ojo, Lagos, Nigeria, is completely different from the another person's experience in South Korea of love. But I say that we share both substance of love. We understand, we can feel it. So what is compelling for me is that if I can translate or if I see a movie that substance, I can feel or understand that substance or that theme of love, anger, passion, whatever, if it can, travel around the world and resonate with anybody with a global audience. And that's just what is compelling to me, really.
I'll come back to you on that point of films or stories that travel, because truly, as you have said, the human feelings, emotions, etc., are the same worldwide, but each one tinged with its local space. Victor, let me turn to you here. I still remember very clearly the kind of emotions that your series, How She Left My Brother, I still picture that very well. It was one that was very touching, really, and the simplicity of it all, which is something Biodun is compelling story.
Okay. Sorry, just confirming you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So I like the fact that you came to me last. If we can keep this up, this will be great, because I just have to copy other people's homework. And I mean, thankfully, it's people whose work I know on a personal level. So I'm just gonna, like I said, openly quote from their homework. But here's the thing: I just want to make one note. In my current position, I have the privilege of reading through a lot of pitches a week, averaging about 60 to 100 a week, right? And I will say one thing: relatable is often confused for recognizable, and they're not the same thing. The fact that I think authenticity is perhaps the most important part of relatability. If we've seen so many movies that we know what a gunfight on screen looks like, so we think we know what it should look like. But it's going to get compelling if we focus on what it feels like. And anyone who's been around a real gunfight, it's almost like watching Tom and Jerry with kids. And you can see the kids who've actually been in a fight on the playground. Tom and Jerry hits very different. Because somebody's stepping on a rake and getting, a tooth knocked out. To a kid who's never been in a fight, it's funny. To a kid who's actually been in a fight, it's different. I think one of the biggest issues I've come across is people borrowing from other films. I wanted to make a film that looks like the films they like, as opposed to digging into the reality and authenticity of their everyday life and telling the story from there. I'm not saying films have to, mimic real life one-to-one, but I think what makes it really compelling is the authenticity and the relatability, but focusing on the authenticity of the emotion, right? It's about how it makes the audience feel. If you can't say I've been here before, then you should make them go, wait, what would I do if I was in this position? Right. So I think that's the biggest key. So authenticity and relatability.
I wonder if you can expand a bit more. This thing you said about relatability being confused with recognizable. Can you expand a bit more on that?
Something that's relatable is something that we can feel. I mean, Emma used the perfect example. People fall in love anywhere, everywhere, but it's not the same thing. Look, the standing joke is this: two people kissing in the rain is visual shorthand for romance in the West.
Mm-hmm.
In Nigeria, is shorthand for pneumonia and typhoid. Like that's not what we do. We don't go kissing in the rain. But I'm sure a lot of people have done that thing when you were in school, of you walk her to her hostel, she walks you back to yours. You walk you back. I mean,
Right.
people of a certain age know about that midnight call where you're sitting there waiting for 11:50, go, and then you talk and fall asleep on the phone. Certain people understand that, right? We have things that are authentic to us. The feeling is universal. Falling in love with someone, people standing up at a wedding is recognizable. But in terms of falling in love and what that feels like for us, it's relatable when it's we I can see that I did that, I know somebody who did that, or I can see myself doing that. The whole big gesture, not many people have run through an airport to, stop the one they love from going away. But I think I can speak for most people. Okay, I can only speak for most guys. You've done something incredibly stupid. You should have apologized. You machoed up and didn't, and then later had to, go back and be like, all right, I messed up. That I don't care what language you are. I don't know whether you have to climb to the top of a mountain to do it. You've done that via email, I don't care how you did it. So it's the main thing is the fact that you've seen it before, or it's a form that is familiar to you, doesn't automatically make it relatable. It's relatable if I can summon the feelings. I can see it and instantly feel, as opposed to see it and recognize it. I can look at an elephant and say, oh, that's an elephant. I could do that since I was 3. But that's a different feeling if you're standing 1 foot away from an elephant. Like, that's a whole different thing. And I think us as filmmakers, our job is to make us feel like we're standing right there, as opposed to just putting images on the screen.
But part of the challenge we face in this regard not be that sometimes people are holding the West as the go-to, as the ideal, and then this thing of, well, we're negating our own, because then they say, well, I'm a bit embarrassed, or I don't think what we have is enough or sufficient in this way, so we then tend to drift. Could that be part of it? I will come back to you on that with an answer for that, Victor. I see you smiling. But let me ask Biodun this one. This one of really, because the thing, the sense that sometimes people are, should I say, ashamed, or they don't think it's good enough, our own realities, that this is why they tend to ape, as Victor has said, using images that are more recognizable for the West, but not for here. What do you think about that?
I think it's I'm looking for the right English, but I think it's the post-traumatic residue of colonization and slavery. Because, and again, I think, to be very serious, the average Nigerian is an aficionado, highly influenced by the Western culture, always wanting to imitate the Western culture. And I think that we saw a shift just before the time of Jennifer, the movie Jennifer, the very first one some years ago, where everybody thought having an accent was the hip thing. And then when Jennifer came out, all of a sudden, and then we now had follow up with Files, everybody now thought speaking with affectation was the in thing. It was at that point, I think, that shift began gradually, where we began to embrace what made us unique, our H factor, our R factor. But before then, everybody wanted to sound, like an American or a British, I want a Ghana in it. It was always that. So I think that, this is just to buttress the fact that the average Nigerian is an aficionado, and we're very inspired and by the Western culture. We're very influenced by it, and we want to. But I think that the damage is when we think that our story is not good enough, our experience is not good enough. Because look, no matter how Westernly influenced you are, you cannot sell sand to the Arabs.
Right.
Your film can only travel if the experience you are selling is unique to you, because that is therein lies the authenticity and the exportable value of that, because then you are opening up the world to see something that they've never seen, or they don't know about you, your culture, your race, your personal experience. So I think that it's important that the young people, as heavily influenced as we are by the Western culture, they can serve as foundations, like structure, but the content has to be authentic. The content has to be our experience. That's the only thing that is exportable in that moment. It's not their own, you can't tell them about how they feel, but you can tell them how. we are dealing with certain things. And it's been evident in a lot of films that have gone on to win Oscars, or the films that have really crossed countries or crossed borders. These are films that have really talked about the authentic experiences of the filmmakers as related to their country.
Right. Thank you. Ema, you have, well, I was going to say you've done quite a bit of traveling recently, but your films, yes, have really gone out there, and because you have tended to focus very much on the local realities. What will be your response really to this point, that sometimes it could be that people are a bit embarrassed, or they are not confident enough of their own realities to want to put that on screen? Is that the sense you get from dealing with others?
I think I'm going to bring my own personal, experience. And I mean, I stumbled into, I don't like the term people saying that I make film of local realities. I think that I can make films of any reality. I mean, it's just what I can afford at the moment, really. I stumbled into this world where I made this movie with $10,000, and it just started traveling around the world. And the reason I made this movie was because I'd worked for a long time on both sides. I'd worked in Nollywood, and I'd worked in Nollywood, and I'd worked as a video journalist for the BBC. And I would go on the field and see people and just feel characters. And I just wanted to make something different. I'm very, very inspired by my documentary background. And I just wanted to make, you know, something different. And I was like, okay, what do I have? I have this car, I have this money, I have this idea. Let me just go out and make this film. And I made the film, and that was where the magic happened, right? And so I don't think that, from my experience as a film maker, I really think that films are a reflection of our culture, and films are a reflection of the money pouring in and what people are making, right? I think that a lot of, and I was in that place where, because I was so influenced by my culture, I didn't think that I was permitted to make a certain kind of film, right? I only felt that in order to succeed, I had to follow a template, right? And don't get me wrong, the older I get, the more I began to realize that everyone is allowed to make any kind of film, right? Any kind of film, right? I mean, I was in the Locarno Film Festival, and there was this film where this character was walking through the field for 5 minutes, and the audience were, just staring at the screen, and I was like, what the hell? Like, what are these people watching, right? And then we cut to him dancing for 5 minutes in slow motion in a room. And I was looking at the audience and looking at the screen. I was like, dang, this film can never exist in Nigeria, right? Where somebody is just dancing for 5 minutes on the screen, right? But these films are valid, and there's an audience for them. But I feel that a lot of filmmakers are not given, the environment to explore is not there, right? And the environment to try different types of stories is not there. The audience, the building the audience that would appreciate different type of stories. We don't have that, right? When you look at France, they have a very active budget to, support their independent filmmaking, so it's not influenced by Hollywood. So I think that the reason why we tend to see a lot of Hollywood movies is because, I mean, like I said, film is just an expression of who we are. The young people are expressing themselves in the way that they know how to, right? And we see it in our films, we see it everywhere, we see it, and we don't get to see a lot of people trying out different things. And if you look at the music industry, right? Afrobeat really exploded when you had the likes of uh Stunning AGP Square coming out, with their own flavor. And music is cheap, right? It's compared to film, producing one album is cheaper than making a movie. So you had a lot of experiments with music, and it got us to where we are, where Afrobeat is sort of on that global stage. And I think that, Nollywood has done a great job in experimenting with the VHS. And I think that we're still on that journey. And I think that we're beginning to understand, to really appreciate our voice. And, I think we're on a journey in finding ourselves. I think that's what I would say with films. And it's not as easy as the music industry where, oh yeah, you can just make a movie with, you can make an album with, in your bedroom. It takes an army to make a film. I think that the reason why our films tend to be in that style is because the younger generation and most filmmakers are very influenced by the culture, by what they see. And film is very expensive to experiment. And even though we're beginning to see that grow, I think that it's going to be a journey, not a sprint, to get to that point where we have our stamps as a storyteller, you know. Yeah.
With reference to what you said about people not experimenting and perhaps discovering new audiences for their films, could that not be, even though yes, you hinted at that already, but the sense that it's a limitation caused by the lack of financing. So people want to play safe
Mm.
to make films that
Yeah,
they
like,
say, yes, there are audiences already. I know I will get my money back.
yeah. I mean, film is also a business. Let's be factual. It's also a business. And if I'm going to, and as a business person, if I'm going to invest, say, 500 million naira and pull investments from different people, I should be able to get my money back, right? And I understand that. So it's because I don't want to explicitly blame it on the financial institution. I think that also, and I'm also going to be very blunt, the people who make the other kinds of film have not proven that there's a viable market, really. And I think that I mean, if you look at the Funke Akindele model, who I'm really, really a huge fan of, right? She is like a walking market, like she has built an audience for herself. And I think that we're living in times where there's nothing stopping the producer or the filmmaker from having an access in that audience. You have to show that your business, you have to show that your film in some way is viable to be able to attract the investments that you want to attract. And it's a very dicey situation where we all know that there's hardly any kind of grants or funding in Nigeria or in Africa, and the industry has been built on people who have gone forward. So it would be very weird for me to claim that because I make a certain type of film, I demand a certain type of budget. I have to show that my business is viable too, because I work in an industry that is equity based, right? So I won't 100% blame it on the financial institution. It's a market, it's risky. People would invest in where they can see their returns, which is the truth. I think, but what I would say to filmmakers or people or producers who make a different type of films or want to explore, that I'm of that opinion that nothing is stopping us from accessing the audience right now. I think it's our job to see the films that we want to make as a business and draw the audience and then be able to access the finance you want for it. I mean, it's a market, and the market goes to where there's demand, where there's supply at the end of the day. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Victor,
And can I
you
can
was
I just add something to it? Like
sure.
I think that as artists, we're very, oh, I made the next best thing, and it's the next best thing to sliced bread. And the audience must like my film, right? And it's a journey that I had to come to, right? To realize that, look, that it's yes, your film is the next best thing to sliced bread, but it's your film, right? It's very subjective, right? And and I always give this an analogy. If you make a shoe, right, you don't go to to people to say, "Oh, I made this beautiful shoe. You must like it and put it on your feet." No, you go to the market, you put it out there, you exhibit it, you build an audience, then you scale, right? And I think that's for the continent that we are on. I think that's a model that works for us. And yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, Victor, back to you. You were smiling, or you smiled when I raised the question about the whole business of imitating and perhaps being due to people not being so sure of their own roots. What are your views on that?
Once again, I am very thankful that I come after the ladies because they are far more media trained than I am, apparently, because I struggle with being politically correct. Okay, look, The Visit and Breaded Life are two completely different types of films, right? They are two completely different types of films. One of my favorite films of all time, Nigerian films of all time, is Kasala. Emma knows, so it is not like I don't know how to form. Simply because it showed a world that have worked very hard to not let people know that I come from. But here's the thing, right? It's the world building. I'm going to borrow a term from building. The average audience member claims to be an aficionado. There's this false expertise, which is not a real thing. Any comparisons between Hollywood and Nollywood is a conversation I don't even entertain, because Nollywood is not yet 40 years old. I'm just saying, almost everybody on this call has a parent or an older one that's older than Nollywood. Just facts. Nollywood, as we know it, is not to 40 years old. Hollywood is pushing 140. That's 100-year. Listen, it is good to know your mates. And as Emma said, it's a business, right? All right, so here's what it is. Most people go to film for escapism, right? They wanna leave the world of band A and no money, and they want to travel somewhere else for at least 2 hours. The problem is they look down on the worlds that exist. If we took a roll call of everybody on this call right now, how many of the 36 states have you been to? 36 states of Nigeria, not, we like to fly far away. 36 states of Nigeria, how many? I think I've done only like 10. I don't think I've spent a night in all the 10. Imagine my shock when my kid brings home a geography assignment and I realize that the East is not in the east of Nigeria. See, that gave me a headache for like 3 days. I know some of you are Googling the map of Nigeria now. Please do it. The East is not in the east of Nigeria. I think the most eastern state is Taraba, if I remember correctly, which is just like, not Taraba, sorry. What's the name of the state? Is it Taraba? That's on the most eastern curve of Nigeria. And you're like, wait, what? But I've been calling, Enugu is not in the east. It's east of Lagos, but that's a whole other thing, right? So it's one of these things where people, the audience claims they know what they want. They claim that they don't. They just want to be entertained. The problem is that we look down on the worlds that are available to us. Somebody who grew up in Shomolu and somebody who grew up in Southwest Ikoyi didn't grow up in the same Lagos. We just ignore the worlds that are available to us, and we don't look down on them as separate worlds. So maybe to go back to your first question, another part about making the story compelling is the authenticity in the world building. If it's escapism, you want us to just jump into the story, forget all our worries for 2 hours, and then come back. For a TV show, you have your work cut out longer for you because they're going to spend a lot more time than 2 hours in that world. It's the world building. There is a completely different world. I grew up in Benin. It's completely different. When I came to Lagos and saw people, I was that guy who was staring at flyovers and taking pictures next to bus stops, right? Like a full bushman. But when I also came and saw people like quarreling for an hour and nobody has broken a bottle, I was very confused. Because where I come from, you punch first, ask questions later. You know what I mean? Because that has a completely different vibe. There are different worlds within even the same Lagos, different worlds within Nigeria. It's just people preferring to, or not even preferring, people looking down on the worlds available to us to explore. You know what I mean? There was a show recently that I was consulting on for a foreign company, I can't say it, but they made a show about the police force in Nigeria as the heroes. And it took almost 2 hours for us as consultants to explain to them, Nigerians typically don't see the police as heroes. Like the Nigerian police force actually does some work. I'm not going to sit here and diss them like that. But the idea is there is a prevalent thing, right? And if you want to tell that story to Nigerians, you have to take that into consideration, because we also have to learn to look at the police as human beings. Those are people's brothers, people's parents, right? But we do have a reason for why we feel sort of a certain way about the police, right? But that world, they don't understand it. To them, oh, the cops are helping you, so the cops are the good guys. There are worlds available to us. We like to look at other people's worlds, right? And sort of just bypass the many worlds available to us. In terms of whether it's a budget issue, or I'm just going to go back to that thing with the music thing, right? P Squared came out remixing other people's songs. Let's just keep it real. Everybody, and I'm not dissing them in any way. It's facts. That's how all of us started. You started writing or you started shooting because you were inspired by somebody else. You started by looking at their stuff. Ooh, I want to make my version of. And in doing that, you found your voice. And from there, you grew up, right? You found your voice, and then you moved on, and you moved on, and then you created your own voice, and you went on to do your own thing. I do think Nollywood is in that place where it's finding its voice. Some people faster than others, but that's what it is. It's not one. It's not a monolith, right? There are going to be different parts of it. They're going to be. It's not a monolith. So some people are going to do it through animation. Some people are going to do it through indie film. Some people will do it in this sort of a funded studio system. Some people are good at raising money. Some people will have to work at 9 to 5, save the money for 4 years, then go do it. All of us got here by different means, right? But the main aim is we're going to all start out inspired by somebody else. Find some local stuff you like, put it all together, and then we're going to make our own thing. And I think that is the future.
Right. Thank you, Victor. Let me continue on that same line, really. So when you sit down to develop a story, what is your starting point? Now, let's focus a bit more on the thing of craft. What's your starting point? Character, theme, conflict, or something else?
I'm assuming that question is for me, or?
Yes.
Okay. I've been doing this so long, I think my craft, it's almost second nature for me. So to break it down into steps is funny. In my experience, I can only speak from my experience. In my experience, stories don't really occur linear, right? You get the beginning, middle, and end. I don't really think that's what it is. I think what happens is, for me, stuff, again, severe ADHD also is a factor. What happens is you're inspired by stuff. It's just knocking around in what I call my back room. And then one day a connection is made, right? I do use a framework. And it's a framework I do preach quite a bit, because I've worked with a few companies, and I've noticed that without fail, almost every company I've had the privilege to work at assesses stories in almost the same way. They use different terminology for it, but it all boils down to the same thing. It's a compelling character in a compelling situation that the audience can relate to. Right? So, and you said it, which do you start with, right? It's a compelling character in a compelling situation that the audience can relate to. Relatability would be, in terms of how Emma put it before, it's the universality of the emotion, right? It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be specific in terms of like the world. Like, I've never been to space. I don't live on Tatooine, but I got something out of Star Wars, right? That's the relatability, right? Is there something here that is a universal theme? Is there a compelling situation? Because that's going to be my trailer. It's the classic Nollywood trailer of 1992, where you'd have one guy shouting out the compelling situation. Asha will not be walk, can't see woman way, that thing. That's the compelling situation. And then, best case scenario, you have a very compelling character who you're like, all right, I mean, there are certain character names you could still throw around now. Shegun Arinze will always be Black Arrow. I still know who Shegun Kadiri is from Checkmate. There's certain characters that are like, they outlive the project. Eventually they may become archetypes or stereotypes, but it is what it is. So in terms of the process for me, I get inspired by whatever, but when I sit down to try and develop, it's going to be, all right, compelling character, compelling situation that I can relate to. What do I have? What do I need? Sometimes it starts with a compelling character. What if there's a priest what if there's a priest who's also a secret alcoholic? But that's how I sort of keep myself in check, just to make sure I have something that is worth spending my time on immediately, or I can just put it back in the freezer.
Okay, great. Biodun, let me turn to you with this one. What inspires you? Where do you start from? The story, the theme, the character? Where do you start from? And what do you bring into play to ensure that you truly hold the attention of the audience?
Okay. I think that everybody knows that I'm always inspired by, everyday life experiences. But for me, is what stands out is I see a moment in time. I see a moment in a day, and a thing jumps out. Okay, this is a situation. Okay, how can I best? And I'm fascinated by that situation. So maybe somebody talks about, a child was found in a freezer. That's just that sentence can then ignite, okay, how did the child get there? What are the situations that would have led to that? And then who are the major players in this? And I sort of beginning to build the world from there. I usually don't start to write until, and then of course, I think almost very similar to what Victor said. I always have a lot of conversation. I have muses that I work with. And when I say music, I run the story by them. Not necessarily because I need the feedback from them, but because as I'm narrating the story, I am questioning, this world I'm building. And then once sort of you have the entire concept, you then begin to ask yourself, who are these people? And then I begin to draw, I want to bring this character closer to home. I then look at, who do I know? So usually for me, most of the characters that I've created in my stories are many times people that I know. People that I know are usually the framework. So for instance, my film Picture Perfect, Jobe was a very familiar character when my mother had a shop in Agege Market. There was an uncle there who was an area boy, and he was always called Jingo or Django or something. And so I knew that, okay, Django was tall and huge. He was scary, but he was a nice guy. So pretty much I began to build. So I always build these characters from people I know, because for me, I'm able to then defend their choices, because I then borrow their experiences, and I'm able to defend, why is he doing like this? Why is he behaving like this? And so once I'm able to do that, then I begin to add then what are the challenges? I then begin to redesign the characters. What are the challenges? How does this character then go through this transformative journey? Because there's the end goal. So how does this person go through that? And I think there's no particular structure. It's just constantly questioning. So because even when the script is written, I'm constantly questioning, why did this character do this? Why is this person doing this? I constantly question that. And in questioning, I'm able to continually refine and fine tune, their choices, But more importantly is that the framework for every of the stories that I've written, there's always somebody. So I'm able to defend it. There's always somebody I'm looking at. I can maybe add 3 people together in a particular character profile, but there's a somebody or somebodies that is constantly being, the framework that I'm building on. Yeah, that's about it, I think.
How long does that, sorry, I interrupted you, but how long
Yes.
does that process take you before you say the idea comes and then it's ready to shoot? How long really does it take you on the
There is
average?
no specific, I'm not sure either of us, Emma or anybody, will say, okay, I'm writing this in 2 weeks. Sometimes you are building a story for years. And sometimes the story comes together in a matter of weeks, So there's no particular. Sometimes you start off thinking that it was a great idea, and then the idea begins to metamorphosize into something else. Or sometimes you just abandon it completely for a minute, and then you do other things. So there is no particular structure. And I think that, again, just as for people listening, that at the points where you get to those writer's block, story block, just leave it and go do something else. You can leave it for a year, you can leave it for 2 years. It doesn't matter, because sometimes not every great idea is a great story.
Right.
Yeah. So there's no particular time frame.
I asked that question because part of the complaints we hear many times is that people say, well, this story that has been presented in this film was not adequately developed. Okay, so is that question of whether people often pay attention to due development. For instance, you said just now that you're constantly questioning yourself. Why this fellow do this? Why is that? That thing of providing, backing up everything. There has to be a reason there
Yeah.
somewhere. And this is what many times people say in some of the films they see, they miss. So that the character does something which is completely out of character.
Yes.
And there's no reason for it. So it's all part of that thing, I guess, of responding to these questions of the why, of the due development, and really, as some people say, well, having a character Bible clearly to know what
Yeah.
each person is all about. Let me turn to you with the same question, Emma. Where does your inspiration come from, and how do you go about developing?
I think it's very similar to everybody, which is amazing. I think one of the things that I do is that I expose myself. In fact, I think like I'm a walking memory collector, right? Because and sometimes it's sensory overload, right? I tend to shut myself up because I'm constantly listening. I don't know why I'm that kind of person. Like I would take walks and stop on the street with malams watching television, right? Just I'm like the way you're sitting with your hands on your chin is a reference for a film I'm already storing in my head, right? Like a character, the way you laugh. So it's like sometimes information overload. So I'm always collecting this memory. I love music, art. I will go to museum. I will stare at people. I would listen. I would observe. And in doing that, um, I have a storage of expressions and worlds in my head, right? And so when I'm going through life and I feel very strongly about something, it's like things and faces that I have stored in my mind start popping up and this picture forms. And let me give you a practical example for my latest film, When Nigeria Happens. Um, it's a movie about it's a movie about this guy who is just an amazing dancer, amazing contemporary dancer. And his mother has Alzheimer's and he has to take her to the hospital and she wanders out of the hospital. And the film is about how he searches for his mother. And in searching for his mother, you see him question or you see him fight to hold his dream as a dancer. And this film was very inspired by a real dancer, Hermes, whose mother wandered out of the hospital, and he's a really good friend of mine. And she got missing on the streets of Lagos, and I was following this thing with such like wow. And like I loved dancers. Like if you look at my Instagram page, I spent hours watching dancers, but I can't dance. So but one of the things that I started noticing is that these people will come and they will be so talented, and after 1 to 3 years you disappear, you don't see them anymore, or they've jackpot or something. So and I also had a conversation with this security guard who told me he earned 30,000 naira to feed his family for a month and of two children. And this thing started coming at me, and this thing started coming together as I was, talking to people, and it was really getting strong. And, it also tied into my journey as a creative, where the struggle to even create, like everything is like a battle, and you're always at that point where you want to abandon everything because of the stress. And all the stories started coming together, and this theme of resilience and this theme of and these conversations were the strongest in my head, and every human being has that. I think that as filmmakers we have we have become so sensitive and aware of this conversation, but every person, every young girl has a conversation about puberty or this guy she likes. It's just a question that just keeps coming out, and as she goes through life, life just starts bringing connections. You just find out that one girl is going through the same thing, or you're gisting with your friend, or you hear about things. So what my brain does is that I store these things, and they all start forming characters around something that I'm feeling very deeply about. And that's sort of how I find my stories and my world. Like with Kasala, it was I'd been making documentaries and I just wanted to make something different. And because I'd been seeing I'd been shooting in, in Makoko, making all these documentaries and all of that. And I just loved the people that I saw there. And I just wanted to celebrate the resilience of people in this community. And
Right.
the car just came through. And then these 4 characters from 4 different tribes came through. And with my world, I stored up enough memories of that world. So that's why I was able to connect this character and make them feel authentic with this theme of resilience and living in Lagos. And that's just such how I make my stories. But the first thing that ties me to a subject is I must be personally involved or in the theme. I must be, it must say, for example, with Kasala, it was the theme of resilience, Lagosians fighting in this crazy society, but the tenacity of these boys. With my second film, OTT, it was the theme of abandonment, and letting go of the past, to build the future, right? And I was going through a situation where my dad had a stroke, and th- mm, I just could see things in my culture that I could not understand, right? And these were things that were really nudging at my heart. And I took the situation of this culture and put people that I knew and put it in this world that I was familiar with. And so that's sort of how I built my films. And yeah, that's really, and one thing that I want to add is that because when I started making films, I knew that I wanted to play for the long run. And I just didn't want to take out, for you to be able to make movies, you have to go and get equity, you have to go and get loans. And I just did not want to have the burden of basic, right? I just did not want to have that, really. So I started saying, okay, I can't access this world of cinema. I can't pay the AME right now. Even though I want to work with you, but I can't pay you right now. What do I have? You know, and I just would build worlds around that. And I just knew that, okay, in the festival direction, people don't really care about who is in the film. They don't really care
Yeah.
about what you're wearing. So I would take these themes and put them in worlds that I could access and, worlds that I could afford. Right. So it's very interesting when people say I make local films and all of that. It's what I can afford right now. So, and because I built a memory bank of this world growing up in Ojo and working in documentary, I I'm able to draw from this memory bank and build this authentic story based on what I'm feeling. The theme of resilience can also be set in a high class world, but I don't have the budget for that. Or my high class stories, I save them till I have the budget for that. I make things that I can afford to, and things that will fit into the festival world. Because the festival world is very curious about characters. They're very curious about the world. They want to see places that they've never been to, right? So I take these stories and put them in a, okay, so it's two things for me. I have the theme, I have the World Bank in my brain, and I say, what market do I have access to? I don't have access to Nollywood, so I can't put the world in that space. I have access to the festival route. It's easy to get in, it's easy. People don't really care about who's in it. So I take my stories and I take my themes and I take my world and I put it in a mix in such a way that the festival audience would appreciate and love, because that's the market that I have access to. And that's sort of what determines my stories and how I can make it. So if I want to come back to make like a commercial film, I would draw from that experience. First of all, think of the theme and build the world around a DME or and put these characters in this world that I'm creating. I hope this makes sense. It's just like a soup pot that you just keep mixing and mixing and mixing because you know who you want to serve the pot of egusi soup to. That's sort of how I think of it. Yeah.
It does make sense. It does make sense. An interesting pot of soup. But now, what do you do to make this soup travel without losing
What do I do?
cultural authenticity? Because you want to
Um,
tell these stories is not just for the
yeah,
local audience. You want it to travel
yeah,
internationally, but you're focusing on realities which are drawn from
yeah.
this cultural space.
I think that if I stumbled into the world of the festivals, right? And it's not a one-off thing, because the funny thing is, like, different festivals require different types of films. So saying films that travel is, it's just very broad. I think that one of the things that I have noticed is the festival people want to feel, right? And they want to sit in the cinema and be taken on a journey. And how do I don't want to say that there's one particular formula, and I'm just going to use my film as an example, and the films that I have seen play in this space. I think that the average person who comes into the cinema hall in a festival is just somebody who wants to have a conversation,
Right.
wants to, and it's interesting because the Nigerians want to escape from pain and, poverty and all of that, and NEPA and all of that. But the festival audience, they want to feel, right? And they want to feel is they want themes, and I don't know, because I think that the reason why I've been able to travel is because I've made a lot of mistakes, and I have, and like what Victor has said, like Sanchez has said, is that you just have a reference and you keep making till you get better. Kasala was a cheap City of God. I took City of God and I sat with City of God for hours, right? And I was just watching every single frame. And Kasala, I like, there were scenes in Kasala, like, okay, even I would show my set designer that this is what I want to achieve, right? And it was cheap. It wasn't a fraction of what City of God became. But I started understanding in doing that with my films. I started in some ways getting into the pacing and the style of that world. So I would automatically, because I have so many films from this world as a reference, I've studied Beast of the Southern Wild, Ashka Faradi. I'm a huge fan of Ashka Faradi. I'm a huge fan of Paul Thomas Anderson. And I sit down and I watch their movies frame by frame. I see how their actors perform. And I take that reference into my film, and something automatically forms in my work that the global audience can relate with. Do you understand? So
Right.
yeah, it's been a situation of plenty trial and error, to the point where in some ways I began to understand, based on the international reference that I have literally studied. Like, I'm a huge fan of Guy Ritchie. Every single frame of his film, I'm watching, I'm storing, and I'm keeping them, because, and then when I take my ideas and I create, I automatically create something similar in that world. And I always use this as an example. You make what you know. And if and this is something that I always tell young filmmakers who want to break into the festival route. Like, if I hand you a camera and you say you want to make a movie, you only make what you know. If what you know is, I've been working in the advertising space, you will make a film that looks like an advert, right? Because that's what you know. And in order to get into the advertising space, and you practice, there was a time where you didn't know about the camera. You picked up the camera and you watched a lot of references, and you watched and you watched and you practiced and you made mistakes and you did all of that. And then you now became this don in this space of advertising. I think that's sort of my journey, mainly because I couldn't afford to make a certain kind of film. I started practicing for a world that I didn't need massive budget. And in practicing one frame at a time, my stories just automatically fit in that world, because I'm very influenced by that world. And, my references are films from that world. So when this audience come in that have been seeing this kind of films, they easily understand something and they can easily relate to my films, really. And that's why I just want to use myself as an example.
Great. Thank you, Emma. Thank you. Biodun, let me turn to you with a similar question. How do you adapt your stories to ensure that they travel? They're not just for the local audience, but they're things that really are appreciated worldwide.
I think that it's the central core. I focus very much on the central core of the story. I'm very much inspired by, no, not inspired. I like to explore the complex dynamism of human relations. And I think that one of the things that we share in common with everybody else in the world is humanity. So I take a very familiar theme. So, which is why many times I explore the lines of the high and the mighty and the low, the rich and the poor, because that is a common phenomenon. Anywhere in the world, there's the rich and there's the poor, and there is that line where we all intersect. So if you look at a film like Sister, which is a story about, the travails of a single mother all over the world, there are single moms who have had to deal with abandonment, who have had to deal with abandonment and the man coming back. They've had that. So that is what I try to do. So I try to explore such lines of storytelling. So if film like I Am Honest, the journey of a prostitute who then eventually becomes a CEO. Everybody likes a grass to grace story. Everybody has that. And so I take these familiar tropes, the only thing is I try to localize it to my own reality, because I feel like therein lies the exportability of it. In my culture, these are the factors that contribute to the travails of the single mom. But the concept of a single mom is a global phenomenon.
Yes.
The concept of grass to grace is a global phenomenon. The only difference is that this is how we are dealing with it in my own climb. And that's what I'm trying to export to the world. So that's one of the things I do very well, is to make sure that the theme that we take is always a global theme. Something that take out the Nigerian actor, put in an American actor, put in an Indian actor. The reality is we all go through that challenge or that reality. It's just that we all deal with it in very different ways. So that is what I do with my stories. These themes always, the central core of the story has to really be global.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Biodun. Victor, let me turn to you with a similar question. But in this case, what role does, you could say, research or lived experience play for you in shaping the stories that you tell, as well as making them go global?
I think research is essential, whether you have lived experience or not, because your lived experience is not the same as someone else's, right? Two people can grow up in the same house and not have the same experience. So the fact that you lived through something doesn't mean you are the authority on it, right? So I just want to put that out there first so that it's clear that research is not a replacement for lived experience and vice versa, right? In terms of stuff going global, I'm in an interesting spot because I'm a TV guy. And just by virtue of my current position, I have to work on a lot of adaptations, right? Where you take stuff from one country and adapt it for another one. And everything the lady said, spot on, absolutely. There's just this interesting thing that happens where there's some stuff that works for adaptation because the core of it was universal enough, but the expression of it may be too specific to one place. And then there's stuff that the specificity is what makes it interesting. At the risk, so that I don't sound vague, I'll give an example. At some point, someone is going to try and make an American version of Squid Game. And it's not going to work. Please, I would like to open the betting gallery. I'm not a betting guy, but I would like to put money on that. It's not going to work. Simply because the fantastical elements of it, it's almost like Animal Farm. It's a bit of an allegory, right? So the fact that, I just found a neat way to say this. World building is not the same as your location.
Right.
So if you build a world that can live anywhere, then it will travel. The thing is that we do a lot of what we do by good old instinct and just pure skill. And later, when you come across marketing departments and etc and get into the business of it, you realize, oh, is that what I did? And when they ask you, did you design it this way? You nod and say, yes. You didn't, but it's fine. The main thing is the world is not the location. If you are focusing on the humanity of it all, as Biodun said, then it's beyond the location, right? So what travels is if you can build a world where the emotions are instantly recognizable, but the location and the setting is so unique that it adds a certain flavor. Why would you want to change that? Then it travels, right? It's the, ooh, I really like the setting and the whatever. But what brought you here wasn't that. It was the humanity of it all. Like that's what got you. But then the world is so the location and the setting is so unique that it adds its own little bit of flavor, right? And we have Korean pop bands now putting out Afrobeat remixes of their songs. Is Koreans doing Afrobeat? Is Davido supposed to be trembling in his boots? No. It's more of an homage to us than anything. They're not trying to, take over Afrobeats or steal anything from Afrobeats. They're just having fun with it, right? Because so that's kind of what it is. I think it's just the understanding that the world building is not location. If you can build a world, story world, focus on the humanity of it all, and then use what is unique to you in your settings and your whatever. Again, to make an example, and it's not because Emma is here, I would have used the same example anyway, because I keep telling people, when you come to me with people who are trying to, they're running across Lagos Island trying to escape with 3 billion naira worth of uncut diamonds. That is just not relatable to me. Like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But if it's like I took somebody's car, I borrowed my uncle's car and I bashed it, and now I got to fix it before he comes home. I know what that's like. I didn't do that. But it's something that it's relatable to me. I've gotten into trouble before and have to try and talk, lie, hustle my way out of it before the consequences hit me. Right? That is very relatable. It doesn't have to be a car, it doesn't, but it's something that it's in the world, it's in a world I know. That sort of thing. So yeah, that's basically it.
Great, thank
It's
you.
just world building is not location.
I like the example you used about bashing one's car because we all remember the story. You took the old man's car and you're in trouble. Okay. Let me turn to you, Biodun. If you were going to, by the way, sorry, let me just say for our audience, please drop your questions in the chat box and we'll take them from there. Biodun, if you are going to give advice to a young scriptwriter, somebody who wants to go into this as a profession, what kind of advice would you give? I know, for instance, that even though you haven't mentioned it here in a previous interview we've had, you spoke about the impact that your background has had in how you approach stories. The fact that you studied philosophy, for instance, in the university,
Yes.
comes very much into
Yes.
play in terms of this whole analysis of personalities and so on. If you were going to give advice to a young scriptwriter who wants to make this a promising career, what kind of advice would that be?
Wow. And I think you probably might be like the lamest advice would be let nothing stop you. Write what you know. Write what you love. They might not understand it at the very beginning. And I'll use myself as an example. When I started making film, my very first film was a 4-man cast, one location. I really wanted to tell intimate stories. I didn't like for the longest time having a lot of people in my films. I always wanted that the film was small and the film was intimate and the performances were powerful and strong. That really was my formula, and people were a little, averse to it because, it was a new concept, but eventually it grew on people. I think that for any filmmaker, any scriptwriter, it's important that you find your voice. What do you enjoy writing? What kind of films do you want to make? Whether we are ready for it or not, I don't think that is as important as you making the film that you want. because it's important. Many times, and I'll piggyback a bit on what Ema said, because I'm very surprised when Ema was talking about how they said she was making films for local reality. I think I was tagged low budget queen because I made intimate stories. It is very easy for those tags to sort of discourage you and sort of make you, rebrand or change your voice. But I think that if that is the kind of stories that appeal to you, intimate, local realities, do it. So it's important. So my advice in a nutshell is for any scriptwriter, find your voice and write what you love. Eventually we'll get with the program.
Great. Thank you, Biodun. Ema, along those same lines, and in line with something you pointed to previously, the perhaps the lack of exploration of new themes and so on. If you were going to give a similar advice to this young fellow, what would you encourage, really? Are there themes or areas or genres that you would say this person could also look into? Would you recommend that you say we haven't explored enough, and these areas are things that are crying out to be looked at? Sorry, Ema, you're muted.
Yeah, when it comes to filmmaking and talking to a lot of young people, the mistake a lot of people or mistake they make is they think scale. So they think, oh, I have to make my first film, a feature length film or the short film, and then, I will blow and travel. But a lot of them do not realize that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And in this marathon, like I would piggyback off Biodun, she said, find your voice. It's a marathon of finding your voice. And what I will say to them is not even in the beginning, don't even think about genre. Don't even think about, oh, I want to make a story about. I'll just tell them to copy. Just copy as much as you can. And when I say copy, it's not in skill, it's in taking your phone out and shooting one scene. How did they make this close up in this film that I really admire? Let me see if I can try to make it with my phone. Or let me see if I can piece together, try to see what this emotion looks like. Take your favorite film, make one scene, make one shot a day, and when you do this consistently, you build a memory bank that influences you when you want to make your own film. It can be if you want to do television. And I'm talking very practical because like I said before, I knew that I didn't have the budget, or I couldn't access the world of cinemas or this place. But I knew that there was a world that was open to me with just stories, right? And I said to myself, okay, how do I access this world? I started studying films. I would take all the Cannes short films and study them frame by frame. Like if you look at my computer, I have a folder of screenshots and a folder of scenes that I want to replicate or things that I replicated. And in doing that, when I started, something started forming. Before Casala, there were a lot of failures. There were a lot of things that I had made and practiced and tried with that something shown through in Kasala. So what I would say to a lot of filmmakers, look, at the beginning of your career, see, forget, oh, I'm a, just make, just think of it as one scene a day, one shot. Start with one shot a day. Take your favorite film and try to replicate it with your phone, then from one shot, go into one scene and two sins and three sins, you find out that you build a vocabulary of things you love. You find you make mistakes, you do a lot of things. And then in doing that, your voice and your stories will start shaping. When you now have ideas that you want to create, you find out that you make in a certain type of way because you have memory, a lot of things you have to pull from. So what I would say to young filmmakers is it's just spend time making a lot of mistakes and stop thinking of it as skill, like, oh, now I have to, if I'm not successful, if I haven't made my feature film, or if I haven't traveled to this festival, just start making small. And in that journey, when you start, make small release work out there, get people's feedback, and you begin to find a certain theme and a certain voice and a certain style that you're drawn to, or character or story. And then when you start scaling, you create really beautiful and great works that the audience will be able to resonate with, really.
Thank you, Emma. Victor, now, I think that perhaps outside of, I may be wrong, but I think outside of television writing, there's not as much talk of the writer's room as there should be. I think this is done a lot when it comes to series for television, and so a lot of attention is paid to this. Can you talk to us really about that, the writer's room, and how perhaps writers could improve their work by this collaboration which exists in that kind of space?
Okay. First off, before I move on, Biodun, I think Biodun had something to add to the last, so that we don't go too far off it.
Oh yeah, sorry, Biodun,
If you don't,
please
if you
go
don't
ahead.
mind. Yeah.
No, please go ahead. Sorry, I didn't
Thank
notice.
you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Thank you
please.
so much. Thank you so much, Sanchez. I just wanted to add very quickly that for a lot of writers, I just want to say this: you need to consume a lot of things. For me, I watch everything. I watch news, I watch documentary. You must watch everything. Stand at the bus stop and watch a fight. You know, go into the market and just sit there. These are the things that I do. I think that is important because those things help, you know, in characterization, in character building, in, you know, story worlds. You can't just say, oh, I like horror movies, so I watch that. You must watch everything, not you. Everything and every single thing. Consume, because it helps, you know, when you are writing. Peace and love.
Very good point. Thank you very much. Very good. I would even say also that because we tend to be restricted in a sense to maybe what comes from Hollywood, and okay, fine, we see our local stuff. But I don't think too many people are exposed to what's coming from Europe, for instance. These are different styles of filmmaking. So this thing of being exposed, yes, it really, as much exposure as one can get would be ideal. So Victor, back to you, please.
Right. I'm not a huge fan of writers' rooms for films. Because films, as far as I'm concerned, have their own writers' room that are very different from television. Because in the writers' room in film, it's the director, the producer, well, it should be the director, the producer, the writer, and maybe one sounding board, right? It doesn't have to be exactly those people, but they're people who will represent those people. Because TV and film are very different. There's a constant mistake that they are, at best, they are cousins. At best, they are completely different. The art of if you love to make within limitations, you see, someone like, actually almost everybody on this call is in this weird space where we like to work within limits, which means you are beautifully set up for television. If you like to work within limits and you thrive in chaos, now this one I cannot speak for anybody else except myself, then television is for you, because television is a controlled plane crash every week. But if you take a long time to gestate and a long time, then maybe you may be a film person, and you might be talented enough to live in both worlds. But as it does with television, it's really this. In television, the director is a very respected collaborator in television. In film, the director is a major captain of shaping what we're making. Why is this important? Because in a lot of writers' rooms, the director isn't there in television. In film, a writer's room without a director is a little silly, in my opinion, professional and personal. It's a little silly. He or she may not be there from day one, but yet the director has to get in there real quick. Because once you get a director on board a film, you are basically rewriting. There's just no two ways about it. For a film, yeah, the director's going to have to do a rewrite. Not having to do it his or herself if they're not a writer, but you have to get somebody in there, right? I think that is, if I'm going to squash 300 answers into one, that would be the biggest difference. Now, to the spirit of the question, I do think there has to be somebody to bounce the ideas off of. So if you are the writer and director for the film, you need somebody else, either your line producer, maybe another trusted writer friend. I think it is absolutely necessary that you have someone who's not in your head. And no, those other voices in your head don't count. You need somebody else to bounce it off. But it has to be someone who can contribute, not just a friend who was available. It has to be somebody who has the skill level to be able to assist in creation. They don't have to give you ideas. They just have to be skilled enough to point out gaps. Because there's things you know that that you may not be communicating clearly. So the person doesn't have to give you specific notes. It just has to be, oh, wait, I'm confused. That is a big note because that means you've not been clear, you've missed something. No, but when did he get there? I have not made it clear that time has passed. That sort of thing, right? So I do think with writing, it's writers' rooms are therapy sessions. I think that's the best part of it. The greatest thing with having somebody else is so that you're not writing entirely from your lived experience. Because the worst thing you can hear in a writer's room is, but there are people who do that. I think that's terrible because there are people who do everything. The question is, why did your character do this? So another piece of advice I have is build your characters from the inside out, not the outside in. If you know what drives them, if you know what they're scared of, what they're ashamed of, what they want, then it's easier to figure out what they do before you put the outside on them. Just a note though, there's some questions, or well, actually a question in the what's the word?
The Q&A.
In the Q&A. Is there a dedicated time to take those, or do we take them as they come?
I was going to pose that to you now, actually. So please go ahead if you want to take it now.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start with the one that was directed at me. For those who may not have access to it or you have a mobile device, you mentioned ADHD. How do you deal with ADHD traits as a filmmaker? Because it can be a lot. I really think someone else would be better suited for answering this because my bedside manner is not the greatest. I've been accused of oversimplifying things and making it sound easy. That's because, as far as I'm concerned, nothing is easy, and I don't know why people should be afraid of hard. I'm just going to caveat out for every answer I will ever answer. Here's what it is. You deal with it the same way. If you're not a filmmaker, if you were a banker, you'd still have to deal with your ADHD, wouldn't you? So you deal with it the exact same way. Let me point this out. Being neurodivergent is not a malfunction. If you spend a lot of time worrying about your ADHD, I will pose this question to you. How many hours a day do you spend worrying about your shoe size? It's something you were born with. It's something that's part of who you are. But for more practical tips, step one is not to treat it like something that needs to be curtailed or fought with or overcome. It's just a thing. Step two, get organized. When I say get organized, get organized. ADHD is a superpower. I've been known to take 20 to 25 meetings a day, sometimes 3 at the same time. I feel very sad for my non-neurodivergent friends who try to have a conversation with me while I'm on one Teams meeting on my laptop, another one on my phone, and I'm doing a deck at the same time. If you see it as a limitation, to be a limitation. If you see it as a superpower, to be a superpower. But the biggest way to get around it is organization. Everybody else can get away with winging stuff. You can't. Organization, aka a schedule, a routine. Make one. Stick with it. Optimize it as it goes. Right? But make a routine that works for you. Stick with it. That's how people become studio heads. Because what is a studio head if not somebody who just runs a schedule, right? I will see if I can drop 1 or 2 links with the chat in the chat for that particular question. But I will tell you the biggest thing for being neurodivergent in this particular range is organization. Because people think it means you're scatterbrained. Not really. It just means you have more ideas than the average person. But you got to organize them. Otherwise, they will slow you down your productivity. What are the career prospects for a writer in Nollywood? As someone who started as a writer and still likes to claim that I'm a writer because that's my first, second, third, and last love. From 2003 to 20, maybe 20, I don't know, for almost 10 to 15 years, I made a living solely as a writer. I think the career prospects for a writer in Nollywood is amazing. The question is, what do you think a writer in Nollywood is? So I think the great way would be to first figure out what that means. Disabuse yourself of any, Hollywood expectations. Get very comfortable with, very comfortable with working on a schedule. Understanding that you are in the service industry. and separating writing assignments from spec scripts. What that means is when you're working for somebody, you're in client services, you are executing a brief. And then when you're writing your own stuff, you're writing your own stuff. But be also clear about what your career path is, because I don't know, maybe it's a fairy tale, but it's a common lie told that, you are just a writer, you can just be a writer in any industry. It's not a Nollywood thing. In any industry, the path is writer to producer. That's the path. Doesn't mean that you have to go raising money to shoot films. That's not what it is. But the path is writer to producer. It's a very long answer. I don't want to do all that here, but it's first understand the realities of the industry. Two, study your craft in such a way that, because the whole point is your name on the script should mean something eventually, right? There should be actors who will sign on it because, oh, you wrote it, I'll do it. And understand that you're in the service industry. You're not here to be a vehicle to your greatness. You're here to contribute to somebody else's, at least at the beginning of your career. I'm sure the ladies will give much more specific insight into that one.
Yes.
But that's it from my side.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Victor. Let me turn that same question to you, Biodun. It's a question from Oluranti, who's asking, what are the career prospects for a writer in Nollywood?
To be honest, I think that the great writer himself had sort of said it all. But what I'm going to add to that is they are great prospects, but I think it's also just a matter of also the rudiments that also guide you to becoming a great writer. Is you sort of really need to sometimes detach yourself from what you've written. Because again, it's important to remember always that art is subjective. So if you think you've written the next best thing, somebody else may think that, it's not great. But I think that what you should do is ask, what are your thoughts? And I'll give an example. I remember when I wrote Better Life, and the first person who read it said, nah, this is absolute nonsense. It's not going to fly. This can't work. People are going to skin you alive if this character does this. And if I think for a second I believed it, but then I asked, what are your issues? What are the problems? And maybe again, because my philosophy background, you sort of put the argument on the scale, and I'm like, I'm gonna stick to my guns. What I'm saying here is that as a writer, you must be really open to somebody dissecting what you've written. Sometimes some dissections are very necessary to properly elevate your story. So I think that is very key, and be ready to work, so essentially a team member, particularly when you're writing with a bunch of other writers, it's very, very important that you must be able to allow people have a say on what you have written and not hold anything you have written to chest. I think that you will just save yourself from heartbreak and depression. It's a very quick path. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Emma, you want to add anything to that question?
No,
Career
I think
prospects?
No, I think, let me see. Because my trajectory has been very different, in the sense that I kind of stumbled into world, right? So I just created trial and error and just, I think for me, because I just did not have access to a writer's room or different platforms, my reference has been just studying other people's work and um, just reading a lot of script, just reading. And because I knew that, and I keep saying this, especially for young filmmakers, look, in the beginning, you might not be able to access certain spaces, right? You might not get that dream job at Showmax or Africa, Magic, or, but I always say that shouldn't stop you from creating a brand and a voice that can get you noticed, right? And that's sort of been my trajectory. And what I did was I just practiced and put work out there. I made a lot of mistakes, and my films just started traveling. So what I would say to you is just look, it can be a very depressing, dark place to send out applications to. In fact, I'm even still in the process of sending out applications, and I still get a lot of no's, right? But I think what you should do is to write as much as possible Like there's nothing stopping you from building an audience. Write as much as possible. Put work out there. Celebrate your work. Just get feedback and keep building. And trust me, you build a track record and you build an audience that when you finally meet like a Sanchez, you have something to show that this is what I have done and this is how I've built my skills. So that's the advice I'll give you. Don't wait for the perfect time. You get a lot of no's. That doesn't mean that you should stop writing or stop creating. Just keep doing that. And then you get your foot in the door. When you finally present yourself to say a writer or something, you have a track record to show that, okay, you've done the work. And, that gets you into the room. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Victor, please go ahead. Do you have something to add?
I just want to add something. Let me try and keep it to just three things. Because I want to answer the question in what I think the spirit of the question is, because it was, what are the career prospects, right?
Okay.
I think there's been a lot of nuggets about how to, achieve a career. And I think everybody has sort of hinted a career is as a writer in Nollywood is entirely possible. Is it a career that will pay the NEPA bills and allow you to live that will pay you a livable wage? Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody who says that's not true is romanticizing poverty. However, it is also, you have to build a reputation. You have to, you're going to start from the bottom and work your way up, right? Here's the things I just wanted to add. One, understand the realities of the business and learn how to write to a budget. If there's a plane crash on page one, I don't think the producer you sent it to didn't like your script. They just didn't read past page one because their budget are finished. So they are just like, okay, this one does not know what I'm going through. You know what I'm saying? Number two, and this one is more about the career thing, learn how to pitch. Pitching may be more important when it comes to selling your work or building a career than the actual writing. Because the odds of who you are trying to talk to reading a 120, 90-page script is very slim. They might lie to you and tell you they read it. They didn't read it. It's the pitch that will be I think I want to work with this person or not. Second of all, when you're pitching, you're not selling your script, you're selling yourself. So it's okay, I want to work with this person. Might not be on this, but I have you in mind for something else, right? Because I say that because right now, every single streaming platform or that works on the continent is desperately looking for writers. It's not a figure of speech and not being dramatic. They are desperate for writers. Part of it is because they don't want to pay Biodun what she's worth and they want to dodge, but it's true. There's always a constant search for a new. There's always. So I just want to dispel if there's any feelings like, I'm doing the game. No. There is a completely separate budget for established players, and then there's a budget for up-and-coming voices. There is. It's not an art budget, however. It's not a grant. It is we need some new people in this space. Where are they? So following with that, have your writing sample. In terms of career prospects, the one who gets the best bite at the apple is the one who has writing samples on standby and refreshes his writing samples every year, because hopefully you get better every year. So just keep updating your writing samples and have it ready to go whenever you have an opportunity to pitch to somebody. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you, Victor. This last thing you said, get better every year. What would you advise? What would all of you advise in terms of getting better? We've indicated, yes, it's good to observe, it's good to study what others have done. But now in terms of really seeking formal training, are there suggestions you could make?
I have a suggestion, but this is why I said I'm not very popular in these particular circles, because my suggestions are always going to be slightly ridiculous. My suggestion would be watch 2 things every month that you normally would never watch. Biodun has already mentioned this. 2 things that you normally would never touch. A documentary on Shark Week, study something on Japanese pottery. Like something, go watch 2 things every month that you would never watch. Go read 5 scripts a month. Why? There's 4 weeks a month. Typically some months have 5. Always add FISI on top. 5 scripts. And on top of that, write a minimum of 10 pages a day, every day for your first 2 years. Do that and tell me you don't have a writing career in 3 years. But that's just me. That's just me. My belief is outwork everybody. Just simply outwork everybody. The worst case scenario, in 8 weeks, you say, this life is not for me. I know. Then you save yourself from a life of what ifs. Because if you actually become successful, this is what is going to be asked of you. You will join a writer's room and then you will see what they call prayer, like actual pressure. That because when you were working on your own, when you were honing your skills, you were solo. You didn't understand what writing on a deadline meant. So learn deadline by yourself. Inflict the chaos on yourself first before the person will pay you for it. But I may sound like I'm joking, but I'm dead serious. Watch 2 things every month that you normally don't watch. 5 scripts every month. It's 5 scripts a month. A good script you can read through in 45 minutes to an hour at full speed, right? And then write 10 pages minimum a day. Listen, it doesn't have to be 10 great pages. It doesn't have to be 10 pages anybody will ever see. It's 10 pages. But at least at the end of, again, like I said, 8 weeks, you will know what your page average per day is. Because this is not a hobby. It's a job. If you had a job anywhere else, you have a fixed amount of hours you have to clock in. You have to get in by 8 and be out by 5, right? So if you're going to do this, you have to know what your daily page average is. Are you a 5-page a day guy? Which is normal. You might find out you're a 3-page guy. You're a 5-page a day guy. You're a 20-page a day guy. It's whatever. But I think it's best for you to learn that on your own without somebody cracking a whip and threatening you with your ability to parent. All right, that's it from my side. And I think some more, logical advice may come from somebody else.
Any suggestions, Biodun?
I'm not even sure what to add to that, but I think that for writers out there, when you write something, don't keep giving it to the same person to read for you. Give it to new people every time, because fresh perspective to how you're working helps you as well. And that way you can judge, and never be afraid for someone to tell you that what you've written is crap. Always remember that it's subjective, but always find somebody new. And then attend workshops, constantly, seek to better yourself, attend workshops, whether it's here, whether it's abroad, just constantly, update what you know.
Right. Emma, anything to add to that?
No, I think you've said everything.
Okay. In that case, Inya is asking, how are you able to write what you want to write and not what the producer will want you to write?
I think the question is, who's paying for what you are writing?
Right.
If you are writing for yourself, it's different. But if you've been commissioned to write a script, that's but I think that what this person is probably asking is, how do you avoid butting heads with a producer who has commissioned you to write a script? To be honest with you, you must be able to provide rationales. And sometimes some producers just say, you know what, give it to me soapy, give it to me shallow. Because again, you also have to understand, who is the producer producing the films for? What platform? What is the goal? Sometimes we have no idea what the journey of the film that is about to be made via your script is going for. So, some don't want you to sound deep. Some want it to sound shallow. So, but I think that you must create a balance. But more importantly is that stay true, particularly if you have been commissioned, if the originating story is not yours, you got to stay true to the deliverable, to the brief, But if it's your story, then you write what you want, and then you can then seek for somebody to buy that. But if you've been commissioned, that's a completely different conversation. You need to write what you have been told to write.
Thank you. Thank you, Biodun. Now, there's another question here from Oluranti who says, AI, a blessing or hindrance? Should writers use it? Emma, you want to throw your voice to this one?
Hmm. Well, I think that AI is a tool like every other tool, and I think that AI can act as a story consultant, right? Before you take your work out there, because it can be a really lonely journey sometimes, or writing, when you begin. I think that AI can provide the tool and the assistance you need to sort of like bounce off ideas and help with your formatting. It's a tool at the end of the day, really. Yeah, I don't think that it has the capacity to um, give out emotions per se, but I think it's a great tool to assist you to become a better writer. That's just a simple answer that I will give. Yeah.
Okay. Victor, you want to add to that? AI?
I don't know that I have anything to add to it. Let me put it this way. If you are leaving your writing to AI, then you are not writing.
Mm.
So I don't that because I mean Emma said it best. It's a nice. Some people have figured out how to use it as a sort of like a query system, as a consultant system before you go see somebody else. And that's the important thing. AI is not going to commission you. AI is not going to, I mean, to do another LA Biodun quote. Who's paying for it? AI is not going to pay you for it. So you can use it as a sounding board if you don't have any before you then go try and sell it to somebody. But there are people who, I've seen this, there are people who generate quotes, generate concepts and whatever entirely from AI. I will say this again, just because of the virtue of my position. The people you are trying to sell it to are getting very good at spotting what AI wrote.
Yes.
Very good. I'll just leave it like that.
Yes.
Also, especially if you use the free version, you understand what I mean? They have the paid version in the office that you are pitching to with your free version. So I want you to know, by the way, just try this. Have you ever tried reverse engineering something into AI? AKA, you use the prompt, AI gave you a result. You took it back and put it in the prompt and asked, was this generated by AI? Try it out. Have fun. You may be shocked what you get. AI can recognize AI. I'm just saying. So the problem is that may put you on a bit on the back foot, right? Because if the first reader, before it gets to the short caller, the decision maker, it's been figured out that you used AI, right? Like some people will say, they don't mark your face.
Right.
You understand what I mean? And they're like, oh, this person, AI, this person, they use this one, no sabi, which may not be true. You get what I'm saying? But it is what it is. So it could be a problem. It can be used as a tool in assisting you along your way, but use responsibly, I guess, would be my thing there. And don't use it as a shortcut to not do the work. It might solve it might give you options to solve a particularly stubborn story problem. You can use it to bridge gaps in your research knowledge, etc. But don't turn it into a crutch. I'm old school. I'm very old school, right? So I'm very. I would have said, oh, don't use AI at all, but I'm also not that old, right? But I'd say write your story by yourself. But you use it for information and and then move on from there. It's still kind of in its early days. We will see what it is,
Yeah.
in a few years from now. I just also wanted to point out that there are some questions in the direct chat, not in the Q&A tab. Just saying.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll jump there in a moment. Let me just take this last one from the Q&A, which is for Biodun. Titilope is asking, ma'am, from your experience, what makes an actor stand out positively on set beyond delivering their lines? Also, as actors, how can we better contribute to the storytelling process during production without overstepping the director's vision?
How can an actor better stand out on set? I think that, your preparedness and your professionalism. Don't be that actor who just glances through the script. Be that actor who begins to build another story to better the character. I've seen people who come to sets with script and they have an entire backstory just because they think that this is going to help them, Be that actor who does his or her homework. How can I better this character? Whether be it a small role or a big role. You don't need to save your work for the bigness of the role, because we have seen that, with even small roles, people have shined and they've not been forgotten. So I think it's important that do your homework regardless. Professionalism. Remember, there are a lot of chaos on set. Don't assume that because everything is going chaotic and then be a chaotic person. Just show up and do your job and represent yourself, you know. The other thing is, for me as a director, I always engage with the actors. I like for us to talk through the characters. What is your understanding of the character? So it also helps me to see where you're coming from, how you're viewing the character, and if it aligns with mine, or it might even be a superior argument. So I think that you can still have that conversation. You can have a quick call before you go on set with either the producer or the director. Say, can I have a conversation with director just to get some clarity? And if you're not able to do that before the set, you come in early enough, and hopefully the director is someone is approachable, and you have your quick conversation. Also, you can also spar with your co-actor. How are you seeing this character? This is what my vision is. How can we both work together to make the story or the character even stronger and more, pronounced? So again, these are things that you can do.
Thank you. Thank you, Biodun.
In moderation. Yes.
Of course. Okay, there's a question here from Oluseun who says, there's this popular saying among filmmakers in Nigeria, if you don't have the money, don't write about the character falling off a skyscraper. As a Nigerian screenwriter, do you look away from this statement and then write that wild story with which that you feel you can sell to an executive producer in a peculiar industry as Nollywood?
Emma, do you want to answer this question?
Okay, so what I would say is, okay, so as a writer, right, just segment, right? For example, there are projects that I have that I don't need a lot of money to make. There are projects that I have that I need a lot of money to make. So I'm not telling you not to write the story of somebody jumping. I like using the example of blowing up Third Milan Bridge. Write it. But know that not every producer would be able to buy it because a lot of people don't have that budget. But it doesn't mean that in your career you won't come across a producer that wants that idea. So write it, but let it not be just have different ranges of things, affordability that you can have in the bank to sell. There's some producers that don't have that money. There's no amount of convincing that will make you. In fact, they don't even have the budget. They won't even look at it. Once they hear you falling off skyscraper, they won't want to talk to you, right? So, but there's some producers as you grow in your career that want to have this kind of films, right? So, what I will say to you is like, look, write different things, right? Don't just it's great to have these big dreams, right? But don't put yourself in that box because understand the reality of your industry. Not a lot of people have that kind of money to make this film. And I'm sorry, you're not that special that everybody would say, because it's you. I'm definitely now going to look for that money to go and because you have written the script, I'm going to leave everything aside to take your own story. It doesn't happen. And even in any industry doesn't happen like that, right? So what I would say to you is like, don't kill that big dream, right? Write it and keep it. But to sustain yourself and to feed your family, write things that people can buy. It doesn't mean that you're compromising. It means that you're being smart and you're going to be able to sustain yourself. See, because at the end of the day, see, babies don't understand I'm writing script for skyscraper. They want Cerelac and they want diapers. You have to be able to sustain yourself while creating your art. So write different things that you can sell to different types of people. There are people that have mid-range budgets. Write great stories with mid-range budget. Write great stories in the low budget area. And trust me, writing stories for a low budget does not mean that you're beneath, this there's a massive market for that, right? There's a massive market for festival films. Watch a lot of things and write a lot of things and see it as segments and, as a market that you can sell to different types of people, as opposed to sticking in one area completely.
Great. Thank you, Emma. We are coming to the end of our session now, but we still have a couple of questions. There's one from Elizabeth who's asking, before you became a filmmaker, how did you know this was what you wanted to do? What were your inspirations and can you share a brief story of how you started? Well, I think she's targeting this with everybody. There's no specific person listed here. Victor, you want to start with this one?
Okay, let me try and keep this as brief as humanly possible. But before I approach this, let me just add a little something to the last, because Emma gave perfect advice for that one. It's just a general thing with people trying to raise money, sell scripts, or pitch a project. Please understand the business of what you're doing. When you're trying to sell a script, think about your mentality. Are you trying to make money for you, or are you trying to make money for the producer? Because I think the dream when you're writing this big script is, oh, can't they see that this will make a lot of money? If they've done it more than you, no, they cannot see. Because the idea is nobody wants to spend the money for a huge budget. So you are hoping that your script is so good, they go and look for the money to make it. But understand, when you are selling a script, are you trying to make money for the person buying the script or for yourself? If you understand this, you will go pretty far in the business. You should be selling scripts that makes the person who buys it so much money that they pay you a large portion of it. Right. Do you understand? That's how your script has value. They bought something from you that made them money. So now when they want to make money again, they come to you and offer you more money than they paid you last time. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's sort of how the business, that's how you grow in the business. Otherwise, there is no scale or website you can go to and say, how much should I sell a script? It's how much did they make from the last one you sold? Okay, fair enough. Now to address this particular question, how did I know this is what I always wanted to do? I was a medical student for a period. I've somehow dropped out of every school I've been to, including film school. I'm just not a great student in terms of organized education. How did I know this is what I wanted to do? I've loved storytelling. I've studied it for 35 years. Obsessed with storytelling. But when it came to making films, I started out wanting to be a novelist, then became a playwright, and then someone sent me a script. Back in the days when you had to go to a cyber cafe to use the internet, it was Tom Stoppard's script for Shakespeare in Love. I read 2 pages and fell in love, and I was like, oh, this is a thing. And I knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It's very dramatic, but that's exactly what happened. My inspiration to enter the business was the crippling fear of poverty when one does not have a degree. So I think that's pretty straightforward. I didn't want to be destitute and starving. And I have been homeless before, but I wasn't chasing a dream. I just did not have any marketable skills. It's not as if I'm not trying to make anything romantic about it. Being homeless is not nice. But yeah, that's how I started. That's my inspiration. I tell stories because it's almost the only way I knew how to communicate. Also because fiction is a great way to not lie. And I know that sounds weird, but consider this. Or somebody once said to me maybe 20 years ago, fiction is not lying. Fiction is the truth about people you will never get to meet. And I was like, oh, that's absolutely beautiful. So all these voices in my head, I found a way to, use them for good, I think. So that's my answer.
That's a very nice one. Fiction is the truth about people you will never get to meet. Great. Okay, Biodun, you want to give an answer to this one as well?
My story pales very much in comparison to Victor's. Had I wanted to become a filmmaker, I think from when I was a child, I was an only child for a very long time. So building scenarios, talking to myself was really my form of entertainment. Being alone all the time sort of enriched my imagination. I read a lot of books because, if you were born in the era when TV starts at 4 o'clock, to be honest, well, how do you engage yourself from morning until 4? Was really just building the scenarios, imagining, just really fueling my imagination. But I think more importantly, when life began to happen to me, I began to appreciate my experiences, and I began to question those experiences. What if this was not the case? Why did this happen? And then how can I begin to explore these realities for people to see that life is really not black and white. It's not even shades of gray. There's a whole lot of rainbows in there. And that's really just what fueled me telling stories. Just wanted to explore that human dynamism. I was not homeless like like Sanchez. But it was a case of, if I didn't do this, I don't know what else I would be doing. So even when I worked in advertising, I was a copywriter, I always told stories through my copy. I excelled in writing radio ads and TV ads because it was going to be acted, and that's how I really knew. And eventually, at some point, I realized, let me go and pursue this as a career, Yeah, that's how where we are.
Great.
Nothing fancy.
Thank you. Now, Emma, you want to add to that, but let me also give you, in addition, the last question here. What are distribution opportunities for short films aside from YouTube?
Okay, so I started out, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a rapper. My parents, it was crazy. I remember my mother crying and saying, "Look at Two Face. Do you want to end up like Two Face?" Yeah, mom. Um, so I studied computer science for 6 years. And that was when I know that I had this IT. There was this last year was for IT, or the final year or the year before, and I was to go for 1 year. And I went to my brother hooked me up with this software company back then. And, I walked in and I was just like, God, I don't want to do this. So it was a period where Tolo Tolo, Sonny Nay, GP Square, they were just coming out. And I was so fascinated by that world. And I went to work for a small production company. I used to hang out with rooftop MCs back then. And I met this person called Banjo. And Banjo linked me up with a company called 66 Dimension, Tunji Oyewo. And then I started as an intern. I lied to my mom that they didn't want me, not knowing that I didn't pass the entrance exam to get into the company for the IT. And I started, and that was where it all started. It was, for me, I was just curious about the film world. I was so fascinated by music videos, and I just went and I worked my way from a production assistant to a film director. So I think for me, it just started with curiosity. I was just fascinated by what I was seeing on television. And I just wanted to know more. And I went to the place where, just a small production company, and I started making. I remember back then I was a huge fan of Mode 9. So I'll take the camcorder, the small camcorder, and make music videos with my friend Collide, who wanted to rap. So we'd just make music videos. And fast forward, I worked with Hit TV, then Clarence Peters, and with all of this, I was just a camera operator and then production assistant. And then I just grew in the skills and I became a director. So it's just started for me with curiosity, and then just going into the industry and trying everything until I found out what I really loved was directing. Yeah, in fact, I wanted to be a cinematographer, but I saw the way they were showing cinematographers shege on set, and I knew that, Emma, your body is not made for this one. And then I started, while I was doing cinematography, I started directing small, and I just found out that I loved it. So for me, it was just trying out everything, and until I found out that, okay, directing is really what I wanted. Writing, directing is really what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now, one final word before in the 1 minute left. Distribution opportunities for short
For
films. Any
short
ideas?
films.
Yes.
Well, I think for me, I mean, one thing is like I see short films as, look, I always say to filmmakers, play for the long run, right? Short films, there are distribution opportunities for short films, right? And okay, I'll give you an instance. I was at the Locarno Film Festival in Switzerland, and we had um this guys came to talk to us. Film programmers came to talk to us, and they were just saying, like, look, we want films from Africa. Like we don't get a lot of submissions. And they were really telling me that, look, Emma, we'll give you a waiver code. If you know anybody, we'll give you a waiver code. We just need to see films from Africa, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And somebody was saying like, oh, we had 1,500 films and only 25 of them were from the African continent, and that we really want this kind of films. So there's a huge demand for films, short films, and African voices, right, in the festival spaces. And in the festival spaces, they pay screening film fees for your short films to be in that space. And if you look outside, there's a growing industry of people who are licensing short films for their platforms. So there is a market for short films. I think one of the best ways to get distribution for your short films is, if you consider in two ways, right? For me, look, films, I right now, back then, making the dollar was not so high, so I could actually make a feature-length film with $10,000. Right now, I don't think that is possible. It can be possible, right? It depends, right? But and for a lot of young people, that's a lot of money right now. So this making this film was a proof of concept that got me into rooms. So from Kasala, my film ended up on Netflix, and from that film, I was hired to write and direct a movie about the Rwandan genocide by an Emmy Award producer, right? So it was from that small Kasala that it was a world that I stumbled into that got me into rooms and into meetings at Netflix, and my name began to resonate in that space. So short films, it's funny when people just say, oh, I just want to make a short film for distribution. Short films can also be that currency for you to get into rooms, for you to get into different spaces. So that can be one thing. And short films can also get into film festivals and get you. There are platforms outside of Nigeria that want movies. So short films can get you into these festivals, into these international spaces that will license your film for their festivals and license your film for their platform. So yes, there are distribution opportunities for short films. I hope that answers your question. But what I would say to you as a filmmaker is like, look, see, when you think about films, don't just think about it only as that opportunity to, oh, how can I make money off it? If I don't make money off it, I'm not successful. There's that place, but also think of films or whatever you make as that proof of concept that can get you into rooms, that can help you build an audience. And the way that I would even advise you is that, look, with short films, look, I started saying to people like, look, there's nothing stopping you from getting access to your audience. From that short film, create an event, charge 2K. If 10,000 people buy your film at 2K, you understand? Or dude, you have friends and families that will buy if 500 people buy it's sustainable. Create an industry out of your short film, and don't just keep looking outside. And that's just what I would say, really.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emma. And thank you very much to Biodun, Victor as well. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your responses to our questions. We truly appreciate it. Thank you also to our audience. I'm sorry, we do have one question pending there, but our time is up. We've overshot actually, and we will not be able to take it. Sorry about that. So thank you once again, Biodun, Emma, and Victor. Truly appreciate this time and all that you've shared with us. We're very grateful for that. Thank you
Most
so
welcome.
much. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Okay. So I wish you all a very peaceful and restful the rest of Saturday and a great week ahead. Yeah. All the best, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.